Your dad was some war hero. Ha! Sure, kid. And I'm a Navy SEAL, Officer Daniel smirked. The 8-year-old boy didn't. His small fingers just tightened around the dog tag. The last piece of a father gone too soon. People in the waiting room chuckled at the silly kid with his wild stories. Nobody believed him. Then the station doors burst open. A decorated colonel stood there, ribbons and medals gleaming across his chest. The room froze as he walked. Not to the desk, not to the officers, but straight to the boy. And he saluted him first. If you believe respect sometimes skips a generation only to return stronger. Comment honor below. 8-year-old Matthew Cole sat quietly in the bustling police station, his small fingers wrapped tightly around the worn metal dog tag hanging from his neck. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the room filled with officers and civilians. His mother, Sarah, stood at the front desk, her voice trembling slightly as she reported the break-in at their apartment. They took the TV, my laptop. But thank God Matthew was at school. The boy didn't seem concerned with the conversation. His attention remained fixed on the tag, thumb tracing the embossed letters again and again. Officer Daniels, a stocky man with clothes, cropped hair and 20 years on the force, leaned against the counter. His eyes narrowed as he noticed the boy's intense focus on the metal tag. "What's that you got there, kid?" he asked, voice carrying across the waiting area. Matthew looked up, his eyes serious beyond his years. "It's my dad's," he replied softly. "He was in the army, a hero, my mom says." Officer Daniels snorted, exchanging glances with the desk clerk. "Kid, every guy with boots and a buzz cut says that. You've got no idea how many heroes we hear about." Several people nearby smirked. The desk clerk shook his head with a knowing smile. Matthew didn't respond. He simply held the tag tighter, his knuckles whitening around the metal. "You know his rank, kid." Daniels pressed, leaning down. "Bet you don't even know what branch he served in." "Sergeant Major," Matthew replied without hesitation. "Sergeant Major Cole. He saved people." Daniels laughed outright this time. "Oh, sure he did. Bet you saw that in a movie. Sergeant Major, that's pretty high up. Not the kind of guy who'd leave his kid with just a dog tag." Matthew didn't cry, he didn't run. He simply looked back down at the tag, his face a mask of quiet dignity that seemed out of place on an 8-year-old. Sarah had turned from the desk, her paperwork forgotten. Her face flushed with anger and embarrassment as she heard the officer's mocking tone. The pain in her eyes was unmistakable. A widow forced to witness her husband's memory tarnish before their son. "Matthew," she said softly, ignoring the officer. "Come sit down, honey." The boy followed her to the bench, his shoulders straight, the dog tag still clutched in his small hand, like the treasure it was. The conversation died like a candle snuffed out by a sudden draft. Officer Daniels returned to his paperwork, occasionally glancing at the boy with something between amusement and mild regret. The damage was done. Matthew sat silent beside his mother, eyes downcast, no longer engaging with anyone in the room. Sarah wrapped an arm around his shoulders, whispering something in his ear that made him nod, though his expression remained unchanged. What no one noticed was the janitor in the hallway, an older man with weathered hands and a slight limp, who had paused his mopping to listen. His eyes lingered on the boy, then narrowed at Officer Daniels. Without a word, the janitor stepped outside, pulling an old flip phone from his pocket. This janitor wasn't just any maintenance worker. EMT Johnson had served 2 tours overseas before taking this quiet job at the precinct, and when he heard the name Cole spoken with such dismissal, something in his memory stirred. He dialed a number from memory. "Sir, it's Johnson. I'm at the 5th precinct, downtown. There's something you should know." Inside, Sarah finished the paperwork, keeping Matthew close as the desk sergeant processed their report. Officer Daniels had moved on to another case already, forgetting the boy with the dog tag and the tale he'd so quickly dismissed. "We'll send an officer by tomorrow to take photos," the death sergeant explained, handing Sarah a copy of the report. "Make sure you don't touch anything else that might have fingerprints." Sarah nodded, gathering her purse. "Thank you." "Come on, Matthew." Before they could stand, the front door swung open with deliberate force. The sound cut through the station's background noise, drawing all eyes toward the entrance. A colonel in full dress uniform stood framed in the doorway, ribbons and medals adorning his chest, silver eagles gleaming on his shoulders, his posture ramrod straight, his expression unreadable beneath the peaked cap. The room fell silent. Even the phone seemed to stop ringing. The colonel scanned the room, his gaze passing over officers and civilians alike without acknowledgement. Then his eyes locked onto Matthew. Without hesitation, he walked directly toward the boy. His boots echoed on the linoleum. He stopped precisely 3 feet from where Matthew sat, drew himself to attention, and rendered a perfect military salute. "Young man," he said, his voice carrying through the silent room, "Sergeant Major Benjamin Cole was my instructor, my commander, and my hero." Matthew stared up at him, his small hand still clutching the dog tag. Slowly, uncertainly, he stood. Officer Daniels had frozen at his desk, pen suspended above half, completed paperwork, unable to look the kid in the eyes. Colonel Harris, the uniformed man, introduced himself, his hand extending to Matthew after completing the salute. "Your father saved my life, son." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she watched her son shake the colonel's hand with solemn dignity. "These men might not know your father's name," Colonel Harris continued, loud enough for everyone to hear, "but at Fort Benning, at the Pentagon, and an outpost across 3 continents, no one speaks that name without standing a little straighter toe." Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably at his desk, suddenly very interested in his paperwork. The desk sergeant, more perceptive than most, noticed something rare, genuine shame crossing the veteran officer's face. "When did you lose him, son?" the colonel asked, his voice gentler now. 2 years ago, sir," Matthew replied. "Mom says he's watching over us." "Without a doubt," Colonel Harris nodded. "Men like your father never really leave us." The colonel turned slightly, his gaze sweeping across the room until it rested on Officer Daniels. He didn't speak to him, he didn't have to. The silent rebuke in his eyes said, "Everything necessary. If you've ever been laughed at for telling the truth, keep speaking," he said. "Stand tall. If you believe stories like this need to be heard." Colonel Harris knelt beside Matthew, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. The action itself, a high-ranking officer kneeling before a child, sent ripples through the watching crowd. "Your dad didn't just serve Matthew," he said, his voice carrying both authority and deeper reverence. "He shaped soldiers, saved men, and made me who I am today." He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a carefully folded photograph, its edges soft from years of handling. With deliberate movements, he unfolded it on the bench between them. 3rd Battalion Special Training Division, Fort Benning 2016, he explained. The photo showed 30 men in formation, serious faces staring at the camera. Front and center, standing slightly apart with 3 stripes and a rocker on his sleeve, was a man whose features mirrored Matthew's in miniature. Sergeant Major Benjamin Cole. Matthew touched the photo with trembling fingers, as if he might somehow reach through the paper and touch his father again. "That's him," he whispered. "Les," the colonel affirmed. "The very same man on your tag, the same man who carried me half a mile through training grounds after an explosion that should have killed us both." Colonel Harris stood, addressing the suddenly attentive room. His voice took on the commanding tone that had directed men in battle. "Sergeant Major Cole refused evacuation until every cadet was accounted for, refused medical treatment until I was stable. You laughed at his son." His eyes found Officer Daniels, who seemed to shrink in his chair, but that man trained warriors who now wear stars on their shoulders. General Richards at Central Command, Cole's trainee. Colonel Martinez leading the 10th Mountain Division. A hush had fallen over the station. One of the junior officers, barely out of the academy, stood from his desk and rendered a respectful salute toward Matthew. Officer Daniels had gone pale, his earlier confidence evaporated like morning dew. "I didn't know," he muttered, barely audible. "You didn't ask," Colonel Harris replied flatly. "Worst mistake a man with a badge or a man with stripes can make." The moment hung suspended, tense with unspoken recrimination, until it was broken by the sound of a door opening. At the far end of the room, the police captain emerged, his expression grave as he surveyed the scene. "I've been watching the security feed from my office," he said, moving toward the group. His gait was measured, deliberate. The walk of a man who had made a decision. He stopped before Matthew and extended his hand. "Matthew, I'm Captain Reynolds. I'd be honored if you'd visit our academy one day. Teach them what silence looks like in the face of disrespect. Teach them what your father clearly taught the colonel here." Matthew shook the captain's hand with the same dignity he'd shown throughout the ordeal. Sergeant Major Cole's service record has been pulled up on my computer. The captain continued, glancing at Colonel Harris with professional respect. 22 years of service, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Distinguished Service Cross in the Training Commendation for the most effective NCO instructor in 3 decades. He turned to face Officer Daniels directly. "Officer, my office now." Daniels rose shakily to comply. The captain leaned down to Matthew. "Your father's record speaks for itself, but what speaks even louder is how his son carries himself when tested. He'd be proud today, son." Sarah, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "He always is." Matthew hears his voice every day. Colonel Harris nodded in understanding. The best commanders never stop giving orders, even when they're gone. Their example becomes the standing order for everyone who knew them. The captain straightened and addressed his staff. "Let this be a lesson to everyone wearing a badge in this precinct. We serve all citizens, especially the families of those who served alongside us in different uniforms." As the impromptu gathering began to disperse, Colonel Harris placed a business card in Sarah's hand. "The Sergeant Major's Memorial Foundation helps families like yours," he explained quietly. "Call that number. Tell them I sent you. Your husband's brothers and sisters in arms take care of their own." A week later, the department issued an official apology to the Cole family. The letter, signed by Captain Reynolds himself, acknowledged the disrespect shown to both Matthew and the memory of Sergeant Major Cole. Officer Daniels was reassigned from death duty to community outreach, a position that came with mandatory veteran empathy training at the local VA hospital. His first assignment, organizing a memorial display for fallen service members in the precinct lobby. When the display was unveiled the following month, a framed photograph of Sergeant Major Benjamin Cole occupied the center position. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "I taught warriors to lead and leaders to serve." Matthew attended the unveiling ceremony, his father's dog tag still hanging around his neck. Officers who had never met him now greeted him by name, some even standing straighter as he passed. Colonel Harris attended as well, now a regular visitor to the Cole household, bringing stories of their father that made Sarah laugh and cry in equal measure. He had become something of an uncle to Matthew, a living connection to the father the boy was too young to fully remember. Before leaving the ceremony, Matthew paused before his father's photograph. Dozens of officers and staff watched in respectful silence as the boy looked up at the image of his father. "My dad wasn't loud," Matthew said, his voice small but clear in the hushed room. "He didn't have to be." The simple truth of those words resonated through the precinct long after the ceremony ended. Captain Reynolds implemented a new training module at the academy. Every cadet now reads a short profile of Sergeant Major Cole before they graduate, a reminder that respect isn't contingent on uniform color or agency patch. Officer Daniels, to everyone's surprise, became the program's most passionate advocate. "I learned the hard way," he would tell new recruits. "Some heroes don't wear capes or carry badges, and some of the bravest people in the room might be 8 years old. Every year on Veterans Day, a chair is left empty at the station briefing, a dog tag hanging